Thank you everyone for coming by. My name is Jules Frank Hotard, and I was instrumental in the incorporation of the city of Gretna. I was born in then unincorporated Gretna in 1872. I married Lilia Dellery, and we had 4 sons. You might know the oldest of my sons, Julius Frank Hotard, because he was the longtime president of the parish school board. I was a grocer, and I also joined the Leather Workers Union in 1903, but what I was really known for was being involved in politics. And that was a rambunctious thing back in my day. Now, I had 3 friends, A.E. Stone, Dr. Charles Gelke, and David Schwartz. The 3 of us. We were the co-editors of the Jefferson Voice newspaper, and we were leaders in the Jefferson Democratic Club. We decided that we wanted to incorporate Gretna because, at the time, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd wards, which all became part of Gretna, paid more than half the taxes for the entire parish of Jefferson. But those taxes got distributed for developments all over the whole parish. And we thought that if we could control more of those taxes and keep them here, we could get really modern things like electric lights and paved streets. So we started the incorporation effort. Now, it split pretty early on politically with another faction led by John Fleury. He was the state legislator at the time, and he collected a bunch of petitions, and we collected a bunch of petitions. But John Fleury and his group had an idea about who should fulfill certain initial positions in the city of Gretna, and we had a different idea about who should fulfill certain positions in the initial incorporation of Gretna. So we couldn't get along after a certain point. John Fleury started a newspaper war with Dr. Gelke. John Fleury accused Dr. Gelke of all kinds of betrayal and corruption. So Dr. Gelke wrote a letter explaining what had really happened and explaining how it was really John Fleury who was corrupt and full of betrayal. So John Fleury wrote another letter, so Dr. Gelke wrote another letter, and we couldn't get along anymore. And the upshot was, John Fleury decided that he was not going to share his petitions with us. So all of a sudden, we didn't have enough names in our petitions to incorporate the town of Gretna. So we had to go out and get some more names on petitions. So once we had enough, John Fleury sued us. And he said that a bunch of the names on our petition weren't legal. He said that they didn't live in Gretna, or they didn't live at all. So Judge Edrington declared that a bunch of the names on our petitions had to be stricken. And we decided that we were going to publish all of the stricken names in our newspaper, despite Judge Edrington having ordered us not to do exactly that. So Judge Edrington held us in contempt of court, and he sentenced us to 10 days in jail, all 4 of us. But fortunately for us, we were friends with Governor Hall. So Governor Hall commuted our sentence. So Judge Edrington found us in contempt again and sentenced us again. So Governor Hall commuted again, and Judge Edrington sentenced again. And the 3rd time Governor Hall commuted our sentence, and Judge Edrington was about to hold us in contempt a 4th time when our appeal to the Supreme Court was granted on First Amendment grounds. We had appealed saying we had a First Amendment right to publish those names in the newspaper. And the Louisiana Supreme Court found in our favor, and all of those judgments holding us in contempt were reversed. So we invited Governor Hall over to Gretna to give a speech on our behalf. And he came over to speak at Lee Hall in McDonoughville. We went over on the ferry in an automobile and picked him up and brought him back and drove him in an automobile to that meeting. We also had fireworks, and we had a brass band, and we published in the newspaper that ladies were allowed to attend, and we would have chairs there for them to sit on. He gave a fiery speech on our behalf, And he explained how he was the most supportive governor in the history of Louisiana for the judiciary, except for certain judges who were a menace to society. Guess who he was talking about? Well, that helped, and eventually we succeeded, and we incorporated Gretna in 1913. Now, we were supposed to wait from the time that we published the notice that the city had been incorporated. We were supposed to wait at least 30 days before we held our first meeting. But we had a lot to do. Plus, we had already contracted for a really big to-do. So, we held our meeting right away. And at our meeting at Lee Hall in McDonoughville, we had, again, fireworks and a brass band and a parade. And we set our meetings, but because it had been so difficult getting the incorporation done, there were a lot of things we hadn't figured out yet. Now, the governor had appointed John Arrett to be the first mayor, and he appointed me to be the first secretary. And we set a whole bunch of committees to figure things out, like, for example, how were we going to split taxes with the parish? How were we going to collect taxes? How would we pay for the street lights and the paved streets that we wanted? None of that had been decided yet, so we needed to do some research. So we set committees and we hired an attorney and we did all these things. It took a while for all of those things to get sorted out. In fact, 10 years later, our first city attorney resolved his lawsuit that he filed against us the year before. Now, we were supposed to pay him under our contract $50 a month, plus he was supposed to earn a percentage commission of all the taxes that he collected on behalf of the city. There was a little bit of ambiguity in the contract, and we had a dispute about how much money we were supposed to pay him. So he sued us, and we sued him right back. And we said, at the meeting that we hired him at, that meeting was illegal because it was not noticed properly, so he was never actually the city attorney, and so he needed to pay us back every single penny we'd ever paid him. We lost. Eventually those things got sorted out, but there were two other political factions also in the city of Gretna at the time. There was Sheriff Marrero, and there were the gamblers. And we were not friends with either of them. Now, after John Arrett, my friend Dr. Gelke became the mayor of Gretna, and he and I went over to the legislature and we testified about gambling in Jefferson Parish. And we testified that the legislature's laws that they were passing against gambling and to try to clean up crime were never going to do anything until they could get control over Sheriff Marrero because he refused to uphold the law. At the same time, we were having some trouble with some of the gamblers. My friend David Fink and I were coming back over here one day on the ferry, and we got off the ferry, and Sidney Whitesides, a notorious gambler, came up to David Fink and he said, "Hey, I need to talk to you for a minute, David. Come over here." So they stepped aside, and all of a sudden, Sidney Whitesides, with brass knuckles on both fists, started punching David Fink in the head. And after David Fink fell down, he started kicking him all over his body. We finally pulled Sidney Whitesides off of David Fink, and we thought he'd left. And while some of us were trying to help David, he came back with a giant piece of coal and started threatening all of us. Well, just then the police showed up, and Sidney Whitesides ran, and he jumped on the ferry, and he hid out on the other side of the river for weeks. Fortunately for all of us, things settled down in Gretna after a while. I died when I was 88 years old in 1960, and I left behind my 4 sons, 9 grandchildren at the time, and 6 great-grandchildren. But there are a whole lot more now. And I am happy to report that my observations of Gretna City Hall seems a lot calmer than it was back in my day. I hope none of you ever have to go through what I went through. Well, thank you all for stopping by.
Thank you. Thank you. Jules Hotard was portrayed by Miss Michelle Hall, and this is her 5th year as an actress here, actress here in the cemetery too. So thank you, Michelle. It was wonderful. Thank you. We will go this way now.